Today is the day of the final exercise. It's the last session of the basic training course. All program participants must complete this exercise to become official team members. It's an opportunity for them to practice their new skills in conditions that are closer to the real world than the classroom. Although we've used as much hands-on practice as possible in the classroom sessions, there is nothing like more realistic scenarios for the participants to use their skills and work as a team. What would you have done first of all before you entered the building?
Surveyed the building, make sure it looks safe to go into.
Exactly. You would have done your 360, that's good, around the outside of the building, and we'll say this building looks safe to go into. The report is that there are 2 people trapped in this building. For purposes of the drill, those 2 people are someplace on the 2nd level, and there is what we call pepper fogger to obscure the visibility inside. If there were smoke coming out of the building, if you could smell smoke, or if there was a white cloud seeping out that smelled acrid at all, what would you do? Not go in, exactly. This is dust. There's a lot of dust in this building because it's been a big earthquake. We're lucky to have the drill tower at the Fire Bureau Training Center to use for the search maze, but in fact, I think the most important thing about setting it up are the small incidents that we plug into the search maze drill that give the net participants a real challenge. In the maze itself, we use a lot of everyday things, pieces of furniture, old tables, etc., as well as a few unfamiliar things that as the teams are going through the maze, they will really have to feel out and work their way around and also identify in terms of their own safety and conducting an effective search. The visuals that you're getting now are very clear, but if you can imagine this particular scenario in the dark with some pepper fogger used to further reduce the visibility, you get a sense of how challenging the search maze is for the trainees.
Okay, do you want to go left or right first?
I think he said left.
Okay.
Let's do it here. Go slow. Turn, look at down here, Karen. It says turn me over.
Okay. Just as an order, okay, moving.
Turn me over. Oh, just turn this way. Aftershock now, last 10 seconds.
So wasn't aftershock is supposed to go back out of the building?
Okay.
I guess it was turn the paper over, not
Yeah,
turn the board over.
right, okay. So
Okay.
aftershock, we're supposed to come out.
Go back down and
Go back
reassess
down
the
and
building.
reassess the building.
What'd y'all do in the aftershock kit?
Well, I started the duck and then we decided to come out.
Good for you.
Okay.
Good.
Safety is a real important issue for the participants as they're going through the search maze. And obviously, the primary concern as neighborhood emergency team members are actually searching a house or a damaged building. We reinforce at all times, before they go into the search, while they're in the search maze, and when they come out, the practices that they need to use while they're going through the drill, but certainly while they're searching. So for example, we prompt them as they're about to enter the maze that every space they're in has 6 sides, the 4 walls and the ceiling as well as the floor. We expect that if they know how to keep themselves safe in the maze, they're much more likely to keep themselves safe when they're conducting an actual search.
That we have a problem. I'm going to gather cribbing materials.
Where do you want to pry?
Right here.
You're going to be prior? Yeah. Well, where's his head?
My drill is the extrication drill, and we pretty much narrow it down to focusing in on just the basic prying and cribbing skills and extrication of the patient. Medical is limited to basic ABCs, and cervical spine is a big emphasis in this portion of the drill. They have quite a bit of medical in their triage, so we don't focus too much on that. And they also do plenty of searching in their search maze, so we concentrated on one little area, and all they have to focus in on is the patient extrication in this drill.
Time out. Think about what we're doing here. Very first thing is work in a safe environment. Look for your hazards. We don't have to worry about overhead ones, but we're looking for unstable stuff, holes. We're looking for a wire. You're walking right over a wire. Several people have walked over at the beginning of the exercise. point those things out. It may be fine, but before you work around it, check. You're going to have to check it out, make sure it's not energized, or it could be. So press on, continue on now. Okay.
In our final exercise, we try to keep simulation to a complete minimum and have no simulations or as few as possible. We use real weights. We've graduated from using things like tables and putting large rocks and weights on to make it actually heavy, and to now we have actual concrete slabs that have been built for us that work really well to give them actual feel of lifting extremely heavy objects. The teaching points that we're trying to emphasize in the drill start out with a quick review. I like to review with the class or with the group what we went over in the class. It might have been a couple weeks since they actually had the class, just to refresh in their mind what the basic techniques of the extrication station are going to involve, and to go over any questions with them at that time. During the actual teaching and during the scenario, we're trying to emphasize mainly looking for hazards, working in a safe environment, basic cribbing and prying techniques, and using mechanical advantage efficiently.
On your fulcrum, as much as possible, you want it parallel with the object that you're doing instead of being on an angle like that. You may not be able to do it because you're cribbing or the patient, but as best as you can, you're going to want this to be center on like this, so that you're coming at an angle like that instead of pushing it sideways. So you have more control. You betcha. Very good.
We also want to go over basic patient exam and patient extrication. And finally, to wrap it up, cervical spine is a big emphasis for us, and we want to make sure that they package the patient, use log rolling techniques and backboards to properly extricate the patient and transport them.
If I were you, I'd check on somebody.
We will. Don't. We will. Come on, we need to check people out.
For the triage drill, I try to remember that this is not a search maze. I try to keep it in a well-lit area. These are people who are unaccustomed to walking through a disaster. They're unaccustomed to carrying victims. So I try to limit the trip hazards. It looks good when there's a jumbled mess that they have to climb around, but they're not accustomed to it, and they trip a lot. And then you've got real victims, real people that they're carrying as victims, and I try to keep those folks from getting dropped, and that's important. I give my victims code words. I tell them before the exercise, if you're really getting hurt, make sure that you know that. And I tell them my name or the other instructor's name and tell them to yell out my name. Because even today we had victims who didn't want something to happen. They were saying stop, but the rescuers thought they were saying stop in the scenario, not as a real person who didn't want to get dropped. And we make it real obvious that their welfare is the primary goal, and don't allow the rescuers or potential rescuers to put them in a situation where they're going to get hurt.
Okay, we've got a total penetration on the arm.
Oh, good.
One entry on the left thigh. All right.
In order to make this look realistic, it's kind of fun because there's a lot of moulage involved, a lot of fake blood, and you can get kind of inventive. Today we had victims with impaled objects, basically pieces of copper wire that wrapped around them to look like an impaled object that was stuck under their clothes. We use victims who can get really animated, and they add a lot to the exercise. They act out the part, and the acting is about 90% of the reality of the thing. And these folks don't ever get to treat somebody who's acting as if they really had that injury or that problem at the time.
Next team, exit the building!
When you went in there, what was your first thing? You were going to get all the walking people out, right?
Right.
Right.
I hollered, nobody came. Didn't do
All right.
that.
Well, they didn't come, but you needed to walk them out. You had a couple people right at the start that
right.
could have walked out. You got one guy walking around asking to help, and you're not using him. You're just letting him walk around. Okay. And you're short right now.
Came to the door right here.
I sent them to you.
Okay,
Okay.
great.
So, you need to get your walking people out. Then you need to prioritize who you're going to get out. You're short-handed, so you're going to use everyone you can.
Right.
And you're going to probably have to focus on each person person? I mean, right now, what was your goal when you went in there?
The triage.
To triage. Okay,
Yeah.
you're in there treating people and trying to get them and help them out.
Yeah.
And that's not your goal. It's to walk around, it's to check them, tag them, open an airway if they need it, and then move on. And when they're grabbing onto you, well, she had a hold of your shirt. That was a little bit harder. Yeah.
Yes, but it could happen.
Right. Yeah, it could happen. But you need to leave her and move on, okay? And then you need to come back out. You need to come back outside, refocus on what you're going to do, and go in and get them out. But get your walking out.
In the triage drill, it's kind of hard to pin down exactly when the students get it, but it's a team exercise, and that's kind of key. When the team starts to work as a group, when they have the same plan, when the team leader says we're going to do A, B, and C, and everybody nods and walks away and actually does A, B, and C in that order, then you start to understand that they're getting it, that they're going to follow through with the plan that they started with. It's more easy to say when they don't get it because the plan falls apart. When the team, these are folks that don't know each other necessarily from outside this class, and they actually have to start to gel as a team trying to accomplish the same goal at the same time.
Today we're going to be working with flammable liquid fire. Will this extinguisher put out a flammable liquid fire? Okay. And how can you determine that it'll do that? B. That's right. That's the B. Well, when we set up the fire extinguisher drill, we want to make sure, number one, that everybody understands what it is that they're doing out there, what their goal is, and it's to accomplish putting out a small fire. And we don't want them to get into too much trouble with too large a fire, so we really emphasize those points. What type of fire we are using is explained beforehand. We are trying to simulate a live fluid fire, gasoline or diesel or something like that, but we're doing it with propane through a water pan with the propane coming up through it. It gives you good flame length. Those things can be shown and seen easily. You can see wind direction. It's enough. You can dial in different pressures for the public, whoever you're working with, whether they're firefighters or whether they're part of your community, whether they're young or old. You can adjust those heights depending on what size extinguishers you're using, so you've got a lot of control. Come up to right at the edge of the hot zone. Okay, are you at the right position? Flames going up. Okay. The wind's at your back a little bit, the little wind that there is. Okay. Now you do not advance from this point. Start your extinguisher across the front of it, and land right from where you are. Don't advance too much yet. Okay. Come right back out. Your fire's out. He was never in the hot zone. The fire can go out from the warm zone. You do it right. That was a pretty easy fire. Okay, now switch. I want the other person up front, and then you're the backup person. Make sure you have room to see him. Okay? Again, you're right up the edge of the hot zone, right? Okay, go ahead. Sweep, don't reach your sweep. Is the fire out? That's how extinguishers should work. These are pretty easy fires for you guys this time. The last group didn't have quite easy as a fire. I don't know why. But that's okay. Fires go out. What happened there? The wind changed. See the wind's looking toward me when I lit that fire? That's why I had this long pole. Okay? So we have to change directions. Very good, guys. Go ahead and do it again. Okay, that's product running out. See, you still have something that looks like it's coming out? Okay. Put that extinguisher down. Doesn't necessarily. The fire went out, they backed out, they did a good job. They're back into the warm zone.
We also get other agencies like the Red Cross involved in our final exercise. Our local Red Cross chapter uses this final exercise as an opportunity for their volunteers to practice setting up and operating a rehab canteen at the scene of an emergency incident.
Karen Ann Foster.
We can generally tell when the students are getting it and getting the main point that we try to get across when during the final exercise they bring up many of the different subjects and techniques that we've had in the class, or if they have a problem and come across something that isn't done right, one in the group stop and say, hold it, we need to reassess and do it a different way. And it's always fun to see that techniques that we've talked about are coming back and they remember them and use them in the right circumstances during the exercises.